When a retreating glacier in Alaska revealed a perfectly preserved Bigfoot body frozen for what appeared to be thousands of years, I thought it was the scientific discovery of the century. But the DNA results we got back changed everything we thought we knew about human evolution, ancient migration patterns, and the origins of these mysterious creatures. My name is Dr. Michael Brennan. I'm a 40-year-old paleogeneticist from the University of Washington, and this is the story of the most controversial discovery in modern science, one that institutions are desperately trying to bury. September 3rd, 1996. I was in my lab in Seattle when I got the call that would change my life. Dr. Karen Martinez, a glaciologist colleague at the University of Alaska Fairbanks, was on the line, and her voice was shaking with excitement.
Michael, you need to get up here immediately. We found something in the Mendenhall Glacier melt zone. Something extraordinary.
Karen, I'm in the middle of analyzing samples from the Kennewick Man discovery. Can this wait?
No, it can't. Michael, we found a body, a non-human hominid body, perfectly preserved in the ice. And Michael...
She paused, and I could hear her taking a breath to steady herself.
It's like nothing in the fossil record. You need to see this.
I was on a plane to Juneau 12 hours later. The Mendenhall Glacier, like glaciers all over Alaska, had been retreating rapidly throughout the 1990s due to climate change. As the ice melted back, it was revealing all sorts of things that had been frozen for thousands of years. Ancient forests, animal remains, even archaeological artifacts from early human inhabitants of Alaska. But nothing like what Karen's team had found. I arrived in Juneau on September 4th, and Karen met me at the airport in a university vehicle. She looked like she hadn't slept in days, her eyes red-rimmed but blazing with excitement. "How's the preservation?" I asked as we drove toward the glacier. "Michael, it's perfect. I mean, we're talking soft tissue preservation, hair still intact, even the eyes are preserved. Whatever froze it fast. We estimate it's been in the ice for at least 8,000 to 10,000 years, maybe longer." "And you're certain it's not human?" "I'm certain. Wait until you see it." We drove for about an hour, leaving Juneau behind and heading into the wilderness. The Mendenhall Glacier loomed ahead of us, a massive river of ice that had carved its way through the mountains for millennia. But now its face was retreating, leaving behind a landscape of rubble, meltwater streams, and newly exposed rock. The dig site was in a restricted area, cordoned off with orange tape and guarded by university security. Karen had been smart enough to keep this quiet. If word got out before they'd secured and documented everything, the site would be overrun with media, cryptozoologists, and every crackpot with a theory. She led me to a refrigerated tent they'd set up near the excavation point. Inside, lying on an examination table covered with a thermal preservation sheet, was the find. Karen pulled back the sheet and I forgot to breathe. It was humanoid, definitely, but distinctly non-human. About 8 feet tall, though it was difficult to measure accurately in its frozen, curled position. Covered in thick, dark reddish-brown hair that was matted with ice crystals. The face was the most striking feature. A heavy brow ridge, a broad, flat nose, a protruding jaw, but with features that were unsettlingly close to human. "My God," I whispered. "We found it 3 days ago," Karen explained. "A hiker spotted what he thought was a bear carcass exposed by the glacier melt. When we investigated, we realized immediately what we had." I moved closer, my scientific training overriding my shock. The preservation was indeed remarkable. The cold and pressure of the glacier had essentially freeze-dried the body, protecting it from decomposition. I could see individual hairs, the texture of the skin beneath, even what looked like old scars on the left shoulder and arm. "Have you taken samples yet?" We took preliminary tissue samples for radiocarbon dating and DNA extraction, but we've been waiting for you before we do anything more extensive. "Michael, if this is what I think it is, it's a Bigfoot," I said, the words feeling surreal even as I spoke them. A genuine, verified, scientifically documented Bigfoot, preserved for thousands of years. The implications are staggering. If this is a real species, if we can extract viable DNA, we can finally answer the question of what these creatures are, where they came from, how they relate to humans and other hominids. I spent the next 2 hours conducting a preliminary examination, taking photographs from every angle, collecting additional tissue samples for DNA analysis. The body showed signs of trauma, broken ribs, a fractured left arm that had healed badly. Whatever had killed this individual, it hadn't been a peaceful death. We need to transport this to a proper facility, I said. The University of Washington has the equipment for detailed analysis, and we need to keep this absolutely confidential until we have hard data. Agreed, but Michael, we need to move fast. We've got maybe a week before someone talks. Word is already spreading through the university. People know we found something significant. We spent the next 2 days coordinating the transport. The body was carefully packaged in a refrigerated container, accompanied by all of Karen's documentation and the samples we'd collected. On September 6th, we flew it down to Seattle, under the cover story that it was an archaeological find from a Native American burial site, something that would explain the security and confidentiality while deflecting questions. By September 8th, the body was in a secure facility at the University of Washington, and I'd assembled a small team of trusted researchers. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, a biological anthropologist who'd worked with me on other projects, Dr. Hassan Ahmed, a geneticist specializing in ancient DNA, and Dr. Patricia Lynn, an expert in radiocarbon dating and archaeological preservation. We kept the team small deliberately. The fewer people who knew, the better chance we had of controlling the narrative and doing proper science before the media circus began. The radiocarbon dating results came back first. Dr. Lynn worked around the clock for 3 days, running multiple tests to confirm the findings. The collagen samples show a date of approximately 9,400 years before present, she reported at our team meeting on September 11th. Give or take 200 years. That puts this individual in the early Holocene period, shortly after the last ice age ended. So it was alive during the same period as the Clovis people, Jennifer said, the earliest confirmed human inhabitants of North America. Not just contemporaneous, I added, potentially interacting with them. We know humans were in Alaska by at least 14,000 years ago, probably earlier. This creature would have been living alongside them, but it was the DNA results that would prove to be truly revolutionary and terrifying in their implications. Hassan spent 2 weeks extracting and sequencing DNA from the tissue samples. Ancient DNA work is notoriously difficult. The genetic material degrades over time, becomes contaminated, fragments into pieces that are hard to reconstruct. But the preservation of this body was so good that Hassan was able to extract remarkably intact DNA sequences. On September 25th, he called an emergency team meeting. His face was ashen, and his hands shook slightly as he distributed his findings. "I've run these tests multiple times," he said. "I've had them verified by an independent lab that thinks they're analyzing an archaeological human sample. The results are consistent across all tests." He pulled up his data on the projection screen. The mitochondrial DNA shows this creature diverged from the human lineage approximately 300,000 to 500,000 years ago. That's consistent with other archaic human species like Neanderthals or Denisovans. "So it's an archaic human?" Jennifer asked. "More than that. Look at the nuclear DNA comparisons." Hassan pulled up another slide. This creature shares approximately 98.4% of its DNA with modern humans. That's closer than chimpanzees, closer than Neanderthals even. And here's the really shocking part. He highlighted several sections of the genetic code. These genes here are associated with extreme cold adaptation, enhanced metabolism, increased brown fat production, better circulation in extremities. These aren't human genes. They're convergent evolution with Arctic mammals. "It adapted to survive in extreme cold," I said, understanding dawning. This isn't just an archaic human that survived longer than we thought. This is a lineage that specifically adapted to Arctic and subarctic environments. Exactly, and there's more. Hassan pulled up another series of genetic markers. These sequences suggest this individual had the genetic capacity for complex cognition, tool use, possibly even language. This wasn't a primitive creature. This was an intelligent being adapted for survival in one of Earth's harshest environments. Patricia spoke up. If this species was adapted for cold climates and survived until at least 9,400 years ago, the question is, did they survive longer than that? We all looked at each other, the same thought occurring to all of us simultaneously. The Bigfoot sightings, Jennifer said quietly. The reports from Alaska, the Pacific Northwest, Canada. What if they're not myths? What if they're a surviving population of this species, living in remote areas where they can avoid human contact? We can't make that claim without evidence, I cautioned. But what we can say is that this body proves that a large bipedal, human-related species lived in North America much more recently than we ever thought possible. Michael, when we publish this, it's going to cause a firestorm, Hassan said. This challenges everything about human evolution, about who was in the Americas and when, about what other hominid species might have survived into the modern era. He was right, of course. But what we didn't know then was that we'd never get the chance to publish, because powerful people had already learned about our discovery and they had very different plans for what to do with it. October 1996 became the most intensive month of research in my career. Our team worked around the clock, conducting every test we could think of while maintaining absolute secrecy. The body remained in our secure facility, stored at constant sub-zero temperature to prevent any degradation. Dr. Jennifer Walsh focused on the physical anthropology, conducting detailed measurements and comparisons with known hominid species. She worked with 3D scanning equipment, creating a complete digital model of the body that we could analyze without further disturbing the remains. The skeletal structure is fascinating, Jennifer reported at our weekly team meeting on October 7th. The leg bones show adaptations for bipedal locomotion, but with differences from modern humans. The femur has a different angle. The foot structure is broader with longer toes. This creature was built for walking on uneven terrain, probably in deep snow. She pulled up comparison images on the screen. The skull is the most distinctive feature. Brain case volume is approximately 1,650 cubic centimeters, larger than modern human average of 1/400, but the skull shape is different, more robust, with that pronounced brow ridge and a sagittal crest, similar to what we see in gorillas. What does the large brain case suggest? Patricia asked. Intelligence comparable to or potentially exceeding modern humans, Jennifer said, but adapted for different cognitive tasks. The frontal lobe development suggests complex problem-solving abilities. This wasn't a primitive brute. This was an intelligent being. Hassan had been continuing his genetic analysis, and his findings were becoming increasingly remarkable. I've identified several gene variants that are unique to this specimen, he said, pulling up his data. Look at this sequence here. It's related to muscle fiber composition. This individual would have been incredibly strong, probably 2 to 3 times stronger than a modern human of equivalent size. What about the cold adaptation genes you mentioned? I asked. Even more interesting than I initially thought. This individual has genetic variants we've only seen in isolated Arctic populations, Inuit, Siberian peoples, but this specimen predates those populations by thousands of years. This suggests that these adaptations evolved independently, or that there was gene flow between this species and early human populations in the Arctic. Gene flow? Patricia looked up sharply. You mean interbreeding? Possibly. Look at this. Hassan highlighted another section of genetic code. These markers suggest this individual had approximately 3% modern human DNA. That's comparable to what we see in Neanderthal admixture in European populations. The implications hung in the air. This creature wasn't just a parallel species living alongside humans. There had been interaction, possibly even interbreeding. If there was gene flow, I said slowly, that means human populations that encountered these beings didn't just fear them or avoid them. They coexisted with them, maybe even had families with them. It also means, Jennifer added, that modern humans might carry genetic material from this species, just like we carry Neanderthal and Denisovan genes. I thought about the implications. Somewhere in the modern human genome, there might be genes from these creatures, adaptations that had helped early humans survive in harsh climates, passed down through thousands of years. On October 15th, we conducted a full CT scan of the body, looking for any internal structures that might give us more information. What we found was both fascinating and disturbing. "Look at this," Patricia said, pointing at the scan images. "The lungs are significantly larger than human lungs, with different alveolar structure. This individual could process oxygen more efficiently, crucial for survival at high altitudes and in cold climates where oxygen is less available. But look here," Jennifer indicated an area in the lower abdomen. "There is something foreign in the digestive tract, something that's not organic tissue." We spent the next day carefully extracting the object through a small incision. What we pulled out made us all go silent. It was a projectile point, a spear tip made of obsidian about 3 inches long, still embedded in what remained of the creature's intestinal tissue. "This is a Clovis point," Patricia said, examining it under magnification. "Or very similar to Clovis technology. This individual was killed by early human hunters." I stared at the artifact, understanding dawning. This wasn't natural death or accident. This creature was hunted, killed by humans approximately 9,400 years ago. "And then what?" Hassan asked. "How did it end up in the glacier?" Jennifer studied the body positioning. "Look at how it's curled. This is a defensive posture, protecting vital organs. I think this individual was wounded, retreated into the mountains seeking shelter, and died from the injury. Then it was buried by snow and ice, eventually becoming part of the glacier. So we're looking at evidence of conflict between early humans and this species," I said. "Humans were hunting them, killing them. That might explain why they became so elusive, why they developed behaviors to avoid human contact." Over the following week, we conducted isotope analysis of the teeth and bones, which could tell us about the creature's diet and migration patterns during its life. The isotope ratios show this individual ate primarily meat, Patricia reported. Megafauna probably, caribou, maybe even mammoth or bison. But there are also signatures suggesting fish consumption and plant materials in certain seasons. "A flexible omnivore," Jennifer noted, adapting diet to whatever was available. That's a survival strategy consistent with high intelligence. "But here's what's really interesting," Patricia continued. "The isotope patterns show this individual traveled extensively. Over its lifetime, it covered a range from coastal areas to far inland, from low elevations to high mountains. This wasn't a creature with a small territory, this was a highly mobile species." By late October, we had compiled an extraordinary picture of what this creature had been. An intelligent, highly adapted hominid species that had evolved to survive in Arctic and subarctic environments. Strong, mobile, omnivorous, capable of complex problem solving. A species that had coexisted with early humans, possibly even interbred with them, but ultimately been driven into hiding or extinction by human expansion. On October 28th, we held a meeting to discuss publication strategy. We'd compiled enough data to write a paper that would revolutionize our understanding of human evolution and North American prehistory. "We need to submit to Nature or Science," Jennifer said. "This is the highest profile discovery in a generation." "We also need to prepare for the public reaction," Hassan added. This is going to be global news. Every media outlet in the world will want access to the body, to our data. We should contact the Smithsonian, Patricia suggested. They have the resources to properly preserve and display the specimen. This belongs in a museum where people can see it, learn from it. I was about to respond when my cell phone rang. I almost didn't answer. We'd been keeping phones off during meetings to avoid interruptions. But something made me check the caller ID. It was Dr. Charles Henderson, the Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences. My boss. "I need to take this," I said, stepping out of the conference room.
"Michael."
Henderson's voice was tight, stressed.
"We need to talk immediately. My office. Come alone."
"Charles, I'm in the middle of..."
"Now, Michael, this isn't a request."
20 minutes later, I sat in Henderson's office. With him were two other people I didn't recognize. A man in his 50s wearing an expensive suit and a woman in her 40s who had the bearing of someone used to authority. "Dr. Brennan," Henderson said, and I could see the strain in his face. "This is James Thornton from the Department of Interior and Dr. Sarah Blackwood from the National Science Foundation. They need to speak with you about your recent research." My stomach dropped. Someone had talked. Someone had leaked information about our discovery. "Dr. Brennan," Thornton said, his voice carefully neutral, "we understand you've been conducting research on biological remains recovered from the Mendenhall Glacier. We need to discuss the status of that research and the disposition of the specimen." "With all due respect," I said carefully, "that's an ongoing research project. Our findings aren't ready for peer review yet." "We're not here about peer review, Doctor," Blackwood said. "Dr. Brennan, what you've found has implications that go far beyond academic science. There are national security considerations, indigenous rights issues, and potential public safety concerns." National security? It's a 9,400-year-old body. "It's evidence of a species that may still exist," Thornton said bluntly. "And if that species does still exist, the government needs to know about it, control information about it, and manage any potential contact situations." "You want to classify our research," I said, understanding flooding through me. "You want to bury this discovery." "We want to ensure it's handled responsibly," Blackwood corrected. "Dr. Brennan, if you publish this research, you'll trigger a Bigfoot hunting frenzy across North America. Every person with a gun will be going into the wilderness, trying to bag one of these creatures. If they do exist, you'll be signing their death warrant." I sat back, the weight of her words sinking in. She wasn't wrong. The moment this went public, it would trigger exactly what she described. "What are you proposing?" I asked. "The specimen needs to be transferred to a secure federal facility," Thornton said. "Your research will continue, but under government oversight and with classified status. No publication without approval, no public disclosure." "And if I refuse?" "Then we invoke the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act," Thornton said. "We classify this as a Native American ancestor, which gives us legal authority to seize the remains. You'll be shut out of your own research, and the body will disappear into a federal warehouse." I looked at Henderson, who wouldn't meet my eyes. He'd already agreed to this. I had no allies here. "I need time to think," I said. "You have 24 hours, Thornton replied. "After that, we move forward with or without your cooperation." They left, and I sat there with Henderson in his office, the silence heavy between us. "They approached the university 3 days ago," Henderson finally said. "Someone from the Alaska team talked. Word reached federal authorities, and they moved quickly. Michael, I'm sorry, but the university can't fight the federal government on this. We'd lose our funding, our accreditation. You need to cooperate." I walked back to my lab in a daze. My team looked up as I entered, and they must have seen something in my face. "What happened?" Jennifer asked. I told them everything. When I finished, the room was silent. "They're going to bury it," Hassan said finally. "Everything we've discovered, everything we've learned. They're going to lock it away and pretend it doesn't exist." "We have 24 hours, I said. 24 hours to decide what to do." Patricia stood up. "Then we need to make copies of everything. Every file, every photograph, every test result. If they're going to classify this, we need to have our own records. That would be illegal, I said. So is covering up the most important scientific discovery of the century, she replied. We worked through the night, copying data, making duplicate samples of the DNA extractions, photographing every document. If the government was going to take this away from us, we were going to make sure the truth survived somewhere. By 6 a.m. on October 30th, we had copied everything we could. Hard drives full of data, photographs printed and stored, DNA samples divided and hidden in different locations. If the government was going to make this discovery disappear, at least the scientific record would survive somewhere. I called an emergency meeting with my team at a coffee shop off campus, neutral ground where we couldn't be easily monitored. We have two options, I said, laying it out plainly. We cooperate with the federal government, hand over the specimen and all our data, and hope they'll allow us to continue research under classified conditions. Or we refuse. They seize everything anyway under NAGPRA, and we get locked out completely. There's a third option, Hassan said quietly. We go public now. Call a press conference, release our findings before they can stop us. That's career ending, Jennifer said. They'll destroy us professionally. No university will touch us. We'll never work in research again. But the truth will be out there, Patricia countered. People will know. Other scientists can build on what we've discovered. And trigger exactly what Dr. Blackwood warned about, I said. A hunting frenzy. If there are living populations of these creatures, going public puts them in immediate danger. We sat in silence for a long moment, coffee cooling in front of us, the weight of the decision pressing down. I thought about the body in our lab. That individual had died 9,400 years ago, killed by human hunters. Its species had been driven into hiding, possibly to extinction, by human expansion. And now, even in death, humans were fighting over what to do with its remains. We cooperate, I said finally, but on our terms. We demand continued access to the specimen. We demand our research be preserved even if classified, and we demand assurances that if living populations are found, they'll be protected, not exploited. Do you think they'll agree to that? Hassan asked skeptically. We have leverage. We're the only ones who've successfully extracted and analyzed the DNA. We have expertise they need. Let's use it. At 9 a.m., I called James Thornton and arranged a meeting. This time, I brought my whole team, and I brought our list of demands. Thornton and Dr. Blackwood met us in a conference room at a federal building downtown. They listened to our conditions without interruption. You want continued access, Thornton repeated when I'd finished. You want your research preserved, and you want protection protocols for any living populations. Non-negotiable, I said. You're taking away our right to publish, to share this with the scientific community. In exchange, we want assurances that the science continues and that these creatures, if they still exist, are protected. Thornton and Blackwood exchanged glances. Then Blackwood spoke. Dr. Brennan, what I'm about to tell you is classified. What you've discovered isn't the first evidence we have of this species. The room went completely silent. What do you mean? I asked, though part of me already knew the answer. We've been aware of these creatures for decades, Blackwood continued. The federal government, specifically the U.S. Forest Service and Department of Interior, have been monitoring populations in remote areas since the 1960s. What you found is scientific confirmation of what we've known anecdotally for years. You've known, Jennifer's voice was sharp with anger. You've known these creatures exist, and you've kept it secret for their protection, Thornton said. Dr. Brennan, you mentioned the hunting frenzy that would occur if this went public. That's not theoretical. We saw it happen in the 1970s, when information leaked about possible sightings. Dozens of amateur hunters flooded into wilderness areas. Several people were killed in accidents, and we believe at least 2 of these creatures were killed by hunters who never reported it. After that, we instituted a complete information blackout. No confirmation, no denial, active discrediting of any credible witnesses. It was the only way to keep both the creatures and the public safe. I struggled to process this. How many are there? How large is the population? We estimate between 150 and 300 individuals scattered across Alaska, the Pacific Northwest, and parts of Canada, Blackwood said. Small, isolated populations living in the most remote areas. They're incredibly elusive, highly intelligent, and they actively avoid human contact. Which is why your specimen is so important, Thornton added. It's the first physical evidence we've had that can give us genetic data, help us understand their physiology, their origins. Your research is valuable, Dr. Brennan, but it has to remain classified. What about indigenous communities? Patricia asked. Some Native Alaskan and First Nations peoples have stories about these creatures going back generations. Do they know? Some elders in certain communities are aware, Blackwood acknowledged. They've been encountering these beings for thousands of years. Many tribal communities have agreements with us. They report sightings, we investigate, and in exchange, we respect their traditional territories and don't interfere with their cultural practices regarding these creatures. So there's a whole secret infrastructure around this, Hassan said. Monitoring, tracking, protecting. Exactly. And your discovery fits into that infrastructure. Your specimen will be moved to a secure facility where research can continue. You'll be granted security clearances and can continue your work, but nothing can be published publicly without approval. And the protection protocols? I pressed. If populations are found, what happens? Habitat protection under the guise of wilderness preservation, Thornton explained. We can't publicly acknowledge the creatures without triggering the problems we've discussed, but we can protect their territories by designating them as protected wilderness, critical habitat for endangered species, or national security zones. We've been doing it for years. I looked at my team. We'd been operating under the assumption that we were fighting an unjust cover-up, but the reality was more complex. The government wasn't trying to bury the truth out of malice. They were trying to protect a critically endangered intelligent species from being hunted to extinction. What about other scientists? Jennifer asked. Surely we're not the only ones who've suspected or found evidence. There have been others, Blackwood admitted. Some have been brought into the classified program like we're offering you. Others chose different paths and found their evidence discredited, their careers derailed. We prefer cooperation, but we will protect this secret by whatever means necessary. The threat was clear but not hostile. They were offering us a choice, but it wasn't really a choice at all. I want it in writing, I said. Everything you've promised. Continued access, research preservation, protection protocols. I want a formal agreement. Done, Thornton said. You'll all need to sign non-disclosure agreements and undergo security clearance processing. The specimen will be transferred to Fort Detrick in Maryland by the end of the week. You'll be given lab space there and can continue your research. Fort Detrick, Hassan said. That's a military biological research facility. It's also one of the most secure locations in the country, Thornton replied. The specimen will be protected there, and your research will be safeguarded. Over the next week, everything happened quickly. We signed documents that legally bound us to secrecy for the rest of our lives. Security clearances were expedited. The specimen was carefully packaged and transported under heavy security to Maryland. On November 6, 1996, our frozen Bigfoot left Seattle. I watched the refrigerated truck drive away, carrying the most important scientific discovery of my career to a place where almost no one would ever see it. My team and I followed 2 weeks later, relocating temporarily to Fort Detrick to set up our new lab and continue the research. The facility was impressive, state-of-the-art equipment, unlimited funding, access to databases, and resources we'd never had at the university. But it was also a prison, armed guards at every checkpoint, restricted communication with the outside world. Every piece of data we produced was classified and controlled. We continued our work throughout late 1996 and into 1997. The DNA analysis became more detailed, more comprehensive. We discovered that the specimen had lived to approximately 35-40 years old based on bone analysis. We found evidence of healed fractures from earlier in life, suggesting a heart existence, but also access to some form of care, possibly from family group members. We analyzed the stomach contents and found partially digested material that included salmon, berries, and what appeared to be medicinal plants. This suggested not just an omnivorous diet, but possible knowledge of herbal remedies. Every discovery made these creatures more human, more deserving of protection and respect. In March 1997, Dr. Blackwood brought us new information. A field team monitoring a population in northern British Columbia had obtained hair samples and scat from recent activity. They wanted us to analyze it, compare it to our specimen's DNA. The results were stunning. The modern samples showed 99.8% genetic similarity to our frozen specimen. These weren't just related, they were essentially the same species, unchanged after nearly 10,000 years. They're living fossils, Hassan said, staring at the data, a species that evolved for Arctic survival and has remained virtually unchanged because they're so perfectly adapted to their environment. But adaptation doesn't guarantee survival, Patricia noted. Their population is critically small. They're still heading toward extinction, just slowly. Unless we do something, Jennifer said, we have the data now. We understand their genetics, their physiology. We could develop conservation strategies, maybe even captive breeding programs. That would require acknowledging they exist, I said. And we've seen what happens when humans know about them. They get hunted. It was the central dilemma we couldn't escape. To save these creatures, we needed to reveal them, but revealing them might doom them faster than doing nothing. In June 1997, I was called to a meeting with Thornton and several officials I didn't recognize. They had a proposal. Dr. Brennan, we've reviewed your research and recommendations. We're prepared to implement enhanced protection measures for known territories, more aggressive habitat preservation, stricter penalties for unauthorized access to certain wilderness areas. But we need something from you. What? We need you to help us develop protocols for potential contact situations. If a hiker encounters one of these creatures, if there's an injury on either side, if there's any situation that requires intervention, we need scientific guidance on how to handle it. You want me to write a manual for how to deal with Bigfoot encounters, I said, the absurdity of it striking me. Essentially, yes. You're the world's leading expert on these creatures, even if the world doesn't know it. We need your expertise. And so I spent the summer of 1997 writing classified protocols that would probably never be read by more than a handful of people. How to approach these creatures without threatening them. How to provide medical care if one was injured. How to document encounters without compromising their security. It was the strangest scientific writing I'd ever done. In September 1997, almost exactly 1 year after Karen's initial call about the glacier discovery, I got my first field assignment. A forest ranger in Olympic National Park had reported an encounter with what he believed was one of the creatures. The ranger, a man named Tom Whitmore with 20 years' experience, wasn't prone to wild stories. His report had been credible enough that it had worked its way up through the classified channels to our office. I flew to Washington State with Dr. Blackwood and a small security team. We met Ranger Whitmore at a remote station deep in the park, miles from any public access point. I know how this sounds, Whitmore said, clearly uncomfortable. I've spent 2 decades in these woods, and I've never seen anything like this before. Just tell us what happened, Blackwood said calmly. 3 nights ago, I was doing a backcountry patrol. Around 10 p.m., I heard something large moving through the brush about 50 yards from my position. I turned my spotlight in that direction and saw it. About 8 feet tall, covered in dark hair, walking upright. It looked right at me for maybe 5 seconds, then turned and disappeared into the forest. Did you pursue? I asked. No, I was too shocked. But I went back the next morning and found tracks, large bipedal prints at least 15 inches long. I took photographs and made plaster casts before reporting it. Whitmore showed us his evidence. The photographs were grainy but clear enough. Distinctive footprints in soft soil near a creek bed. The plaster casts showed the typical features we'd documented. Broad foot, splayed toes, no arch. This is consistent with known activity in this area, Blackwood told him. Ranger Whitmore, what I'm about to tell you is classified. These creatures are real. They're protected by the federal government, and you've just had an encounter with one of the rarest species on Earth. Whitmore's expression was a mixture of vindication and disbelief. So I'm not crazy. Not at all. In fact, we need rangers like you to help us monitor these populations. Would you be willing to undergo security clearance and become part of our observation network? Over the next 2 days, I examined the area where Whitmore had his encounter. We found more evidence: broken branches at a height no human could reach, scat samples that I collected for analysis, and what appeared to be a temporary shelter made of woven branches. They're using this area regularly, I told Blackwood. Probably a travel corridor between higher elevation areas and the lowlands. We should recommend this zone be closed to public access. Already in progress, she replied. We'll designate it as a research area, restricted access for habitat studies. It's cover story that's worked before. But the encounter that really changed my perspective came in February 1998. A logging company working near the edge of Tongass National Forest in Alaska had reported equipment damage and strange sounds. One of their workers had captured video footage on his camcorder, just a few seconds of something large and bipedal, moving through trees at dawn. The video was grainy, shot from distance, but it was enough to warrant investigation. I flew up with Hassan and a larger security team this time. We set up a monitoring camp about 2 miles from the logging site, using thermal cameras and motion sensors to detect any large animals in the area. For 3 days, we saw nothing but the usual wildlife: bears, moose, wolves. On the 4th night, around 2 a.m., our thermal sensors picked up something. A large bipedal heat signature, approximately 400 yards from our camp, moving slowly through the forest. That's it, Hassan whispered, watching the monitor. That's one of them. We grabbed our equipment and moved as quietly as possible toward the location. I was armed with a tranquilizer rifle, not to capture but for defense if the situation became dangerous. Our orders were clear: observe, document, but do not engage unless absolutely necessary. We found it near a frozen stream, partially obscured by spruce trees. An adult, probably male based on size, around 7.5 feet tall. It was digging in the snow, possibly looking for frozen vegetation or cached food. Through my night vision binoculars, I watched it work. The movements were efficient, purposeful. This wasn't mindless animal behavior. This was problem solving. It would dig, examine what it found, discard or keep items based on some criteria I couldn't determine. Then it stopped and turned directly toward our position. Even from 50 yards away, even in the darkness, it knew we were there. For a long moment, we stared at each other across the distance. I could see its breath condensing in the freezing air, could see the intelligence in its posture. It wasn't afraid, just wary. Then it did something that made my heart stop. It raised one hand, not threateningly, but in what looked like a gesture, a wave, an acknowledgement. Then it turned and walked away, not running, just calmly leaving the area. Did that just wave at us? Hassan asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I think it did, I replied. I think it recognized us as non-threatening and was communicating that it was leaving peacefully. We returned to camp and reviewed our thermal footage and photographs. Clear documentation of a living specimen, moving through its natural habitat. This was what Karen and I had hoped for when we started this project. Not just a frozen body, but evidence of a living, thriving species. Except they weren't thriving. That was the hard truth we kept encountering. Throughout 1998 and 1999, I participated in multiple field investigations. Each time we found populations that were struggling. Limited gene pools leading to health issues, declining prey populations forcing the creatures into closer proximity to human settlements. Habitat loss from logging and development pushing them into smaller and smaller territories. In July 1999, we responded to a report from British Columbia. A hiker had found a body, a juvenile, maybe 10 years old based on our later analysis. It had died from what appeared to be starvation and exposure. I performed the field autopsy with Dr. Lin, who had joined our team permanently. What we found was heartbreaking. The juvenile had been severely underweight, showing signs of long-term malnutrition. Its teeth were damaged from trying to eat tough, inappropriate foods. It had died slowly, probably separated from its family group, unable to survive alone. "This is what extinction looks like," Patricia said quietly as we documented the remains. Not dramatic, not sudden, just slow decline, individuals dying alone in the wilderness, populations getting smaller until there's nothing left. We collected tissue samples, documented everything, and then, following protocols I'd helped write, we buried the remains in a location where they wouldn't be disturbed. These creatures had burial practices of their own. We'd learned from field observations. It seemed right to honor that. Back at Fort Detrick, we analyzed the juvenile's DNA. It showed high levels of inbreeding. Both parents had been closely related, probably cousins or closer. The population this individual came from was suffering from severe genetic bottleneck. "We need to do something," Hassan said at our team meeting in August 1999. "We can't just watch them die out. We have the technology, the knowledge. We could establish breeding programs, genetic rescue initiatives, which would require capturing them," Jennifer countered, "taking them out of the wild, putting them in captivity. Everything we know about these creatures suggests they wouldn't survive that psychologically. They're highly intelligent, used to ranging over dozens of miles. Captivity would be torture." "So what's the alternative?" Hassan demanded. "We just document their extinction? Write papers that no one will ever read about how we watched an intelligent species disappear?" I didn't have an answer. None of us did. In November 1999, Thornton called me to Washington, D.C. for a meeting. In an anonymous office building, I met with a group of officials whose names I never learned and whose faces I was told to forget. "Dr. Brennan, we've reviewed your research and field reports," one of them said. "Your team has documented 17 verified encounters, analyzed samples from at least 9 different individuals, and compiled the most comprehensive data on this species ever assembled. The question is, what do we do with this information? Ideally, publish it. Let the scientific community help develop conservation strategies, engage the public in protecting these creatures. And realistically, continue what we're doing. Monitor populations, protect habitat, intervene when necessary. But acknowledge that it might not be enough. These creatures might go extinct despite our best efforts." "That's unacceptable," another official said. "If we know about an intelligent species facing extinction and we do nothing, that's a moral failure." Agreed. But every option we've explored has significant risks. Public disclosure triggers hunting. Captive breeding requires capturing free-ranging intelligent beings. Genetic rescue requires technologies we're not even sure work. There are no good options, only less bad ones. They were quiet for a moment. Then the first official spoke again. "Dr. Brennan, how would you feel about a limited disclosure? Not full public announcement, but bringing in select outside experts, conservation biologists, geneticists, ethicists, people who could help develop strategies without triggering mass public awareness. It's risky. The more people who know, the harder the secret is to keep. True, But the alternative is letting them vanish. While only a handful of us know they ever existed, that doesn't sit well with anyone in this room. I thought about the frozen body in our facility. That individual had died 9,400 years ago, killed by humans who saw it as a threat or a curiosity. Its species had survived thousands of years in hiding, only to face extinction in the modern era, while humans debated what to do about them. If we're going to bring in outside experts, I said slowly, we need ironclad security, background checks, NDAs, limited access to information, and we need to be selective, only people who have demonstrated commitment to conservation and ethical research. Agreed. We'll start with a pilot program, 5 additional researchers, hand-picked, brought into the classified program. If it works, we expand. If there are leaks, we shut it down immediately. And the research I've been doing, the data on the frozen specimen, remains classified for now, but we're open to eventual limited scientific publication, perhaps in 20 or 30 years when the situation has stabilized. 20 or 30 years. By then, I'd be in my 60s or 70s. The species might already be extinct, but it was better than nothing. I returned to Fort Detrick and briefed my team on the new direction. We were cautiously optimistic. Maybe with more minds working on the problem, we could find solutions we'd missed. In December 1999, as the millennium approached, I stood in our lab looking at the frozen specimen that had started this whole journey. 3 years of research, countless discoveries, a complete revolution in our understanding of human evolution and North American prehistory. All of it locked away in classified files. But the creature's descendants were still out there, still surviving against impossible odds. And now, finally, we were taking real steps to help them. It wasn't enough. It might never be enough. But it was something. The pilot program to bring in outside experts launched in March 2000. We carefully selected 5 researchers, a conservation geneticist from Stanford, a wildlife veterinarian from UC Davis, a behavioral ecologist from Cornell, a bioethicist from Harvard, and a Native American Studies scholar from the University of Alaska, who had tribal connections and traditional knowledge about these beings. Each underwent extensive security clearances and signed NDAs that would legally bind them for life. When they arrived at Fort Detrick in April 2000 and we showed them the frozen specimen, their reactions ranged from stunned silence to tears of awe. Dr. Maria Castillo, the conservation geneticist, stood staring at the body for a full 5 minutes before speaking. This changes everything, every assumption about North American prehistory, about human evolution, about what species might still be surviving undetected. This is beyond remarkable. We spent 6 months working together, combining our expertise. Dr. Castillo analyzed the genetic data and developed theoretical models for genetic rescue, introducing genetic diversity into small populations through careful management. Dr. James Whitehorse, the native scholar, provided cultural context that helped us understand the creature's behavior through the lens of indigenous knowledge that had been observing them for thousands of years. My grandmother told me stories, James shared during one late-night session, about the forest people who lived in the mountains, who avoided humans, but sometimes helped lost children find their way home. I thought they were just legends to teach us respect for the wilderness, but she was telling me about actual encounters passed down through generations. By November 2000, we had developed a comprehensive conservation strategy. It included expanded habitat protection through strategic wilderness designations, a monitoring network of rangers and researchers across North America, genetic sampling protocols to track population health without capture, intervention guidelines for injured or distressed individuals, long-term plans for possible genetic rescue if populations declined further. The strategy was approved by federal authorities in January 2001. Additional funding was allocated. More researchers were quietly brought into the program. By 2003, we had a network of 37 people across multiple agencies and institutions, all working to protect a species the public didn't know existed. But the secrecy weighed on all of us. In 2005, a logging company in Northern California killed one of the creatures. They claimed it was self-defense, that the creature had charged their equipment operator. The federal investigation concluded it was likely a misunderstanding. The creature had been trying to scare them away from its territory, a defensive display that was misinterpreted as an attack. The logger who pulled the trigger was devastated when he learned what he'd killed. The body was quietly taken by federal agents. I performed the necropsy. It was a female, approximately 30 years old, and she'd been pregnant. We lost 2 individuals that day. The logger was paid off, signed an NDA, and relocated to a different state. The logging company faced no public consequences because acknowledging them would require explaining what had been killed. The incident was classified, buried, forgotten by everyone except those of us who knew. That's when I started questioning whether secrecy was really protecting these creatures, or just protecting us from having to deal with difficult truths. Throughout the 2000s, I continued my work. I analyzed more samples, documented more encounters, wrote more protocols. The frozen specimen remained at Fort Detrick, perfectly preserved, a silent testament to a species fighting for survival. In 2010, I turned 54 years old. I'd spent 14 years of my life studying these creatures in secret. I'd become the world's leading expert on a species most of the world believed was a myth. And I was tired of lying. I started keeping personal copies of data in ways that couldn't be traced. I documented everything in journals I kept at home. I began planning for a day when I might be able to tell the truth. The turning point came in 2015. I was 59 years old, approaching retirement age, when Dr. Blackwood called me to her office. "Michael, we have a situation. One of our monitoring teams in British Columbia has found a family group, 2 adults and 3 juveniles. But they're in a bad location, too close to a planned resort development. We need to relocate them." Relocate them? We've never attempted that before. We don't have a choice. If we don't move them, they'll either be discovered when construction starts or they'll be forced into territory that can't support them. The relocation attempt was a disaster. We used tranquilizers to safely move them, but one of the adults, the male, had an adverse reaction. Despite our veterinary team's best efforts, he died during transport. The female and juveniles were released in a new territory, but we'd destroyed their family structure. We'd traumatized them with our intervention. 6 months later, monitoring showed the juveniles had separated from their mother prematurely. Their survival was uncertain. "We killed him," I said to Jennifer after the incident. "We were trying to help, and we killed him." "We made the best decision we could with the information we had," she replied, but even she sounded uncertain. "That's not good enough. We're playing God with an intelligent species, making life and death decisions about them in secret, with no oversight, no public accountability. This isn't conservation. This is control." That year, I made a decision. When I retired in 2020, I would wait a few years for my legal obligations to expire, and then I would tell the story. Not all of it. I wouldn't reveal locations or put living populations at risk. But I would reveal the frozen specimen, the DNA results, the proof that these creatures existed. Then COVID-19 happened, and my retirement was delayed as all resources were diverted to the pandemic response. The frozen specimen remained in storage as the world dealt with a different crisis. Finally, in 2023, I retired from government service. I was 67 years old, had spent 27 years studying creatures most people thought were legends, and I was done keeping secrets. I reached out to a journalist I trusted, someone who'd built a reputation for careful, ethical reporting on scientific controversies. I provided her with copies of data I'd kept, photographs of the frozen specimen, DNA analysis results, and documentation of our research. "This will destroy your reputation," she warned me. "Even with all this evidence, people will call you a fraud, a conspiracy theorist. The government will deny everything and destroy your credibility." "I know," I said, "but these creatures are still out there, still dying, still heading toward extinction, while we pretend they don't exist. Someone needs to force this conversation into the open." The story is being prepared for publication now in 2024. When it comes out, the government will respond exactly as predicted. They'll deny the frozen specimen exists, claim the DNA data is fabricated, discredit me and my research. But I have something they can't easily dismiss: the coordinates of the original discovery site in the Mendenhall Glacier. The glacier has continued to retreat since 1996. If anyone wants to verify my story, they can go to that exact location and search the exposed rock and ice. There's a chance they'll find more evidence, perhaps other bodies, perhaps artifacts that were frozen alongside the specimen we found. I also have testimony from others who were involved. Dr. Karen Martinez has agreed to come forward. Dr. Hassan Ahmed, now working at a private genetics lab, has provided corroborating statements. Several field researchers who've retired from government service have agreed to confirm the existence of monitoring programs. We can't provide the actual specimen. That remains in federal custody, and I have no illusions about getting access to it. But we can provide enough evidence to force questions, to demand investigations, to make it impossible for the government to simply dismiss the claims. More importantly, I'm going public with the conservation crisis these creatures face. Estimated population is now below 200 individuals. Genetic diversity is critically low. Habitat continues to shrink. Without intervention, real intervention with public support and resources, they will be extinct within 50 years. That's the real reason I'm breaking my silence. Not for fame or vindication, but because an intelligent species is disappearing while humans who know about them debate whether it's safe to tell the truth. The frozen body we pulled from that glacier in 1996 was 9,400 years old. That individual species survived the end of the Ice Age, survived thousands of years of climate change and human expansion, survived being hunted and driven into hiding. They survived everything nature and humans threw at them for millennia. But they won't survive secrecy. They won't survive being protected by lies and cover-ups and classified documents that nobody reads. So I'm telling their story. Our story. The story of how humanity discovered we weren't alone, that we shared this continent with another intelligent species, and how we made the choice to hide that truth rather than deal with the complexity of coexistence. The DNA results are in. They've been in for 28 years. These creatures are real. They're related to us. They're dying. And we've known about it all along. That frozen body in Alaska, the one I spent years studying, the one that changed my entire understanding of human evolution, that body has a story to tell. And I'm finally letting it speak. The government will come after me. They'll use every legal tool they have to silence me, to discredit the evidence, to maintain the secret. I'm prepared for that. Because some truths are more important than career, reputation, or personal safety. Some truths demand to be told, regardless of the cost. This is one of those truths. The Bigfoot body we found frozen in Alaska was real. The DNA results proved it was a human relative, an intelligent species that shared our evolutionary history. And the government has kept this secret for decades while these creatures march toward extinction. Now you know. In knowing, you have to decide what to do with that knowledge. I chose to speak. What will you choose?